Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grey Market Blast. It is Tuesday, the 1st of July. No, I have no idea where June or where, to be honest, the first half of the year is gone. But you join me and the awesome Angie Setzer, where Angie will be providing us with a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, I'll get the legals out of the way. So as usual, nothing discussed in this space, session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed the glamorous with a capital G, Angie Setzer. Angie, my love, how are you?
Yo, I'm good.
Yo.
I'd be better if this market would stop doing what it's doing, but I'm great. Super great. It's almost the holiday and it's Tuesday and, yeah, you're correct. I'm not sure how it's the 1st of July. We actually a lot of my growers are going to start wheat harvest probably, the tail end of next week. And I always joke that it's like wheat harvest, Labor Day, Christmas. Like that's just basically how it works for me.
This is how in sync we are, because I was very close earlier on to posting a tweet saying only X number of sleeps till Christmas.
Oh, I hate that, but it's great.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I was literally thinking, I was in my head just before I went to hit send. I was like, do you know what? People are going to hate me for doing this.
That's
there's just no
like,
upside.
let's just not. Yeah, there's no winning in that one. Like, I am a summer girl anyway. Like, I can't, you are going to drag me kicking and screaming into this winter. So we're just not going to think about it. I'm going to do what I do best and, repress those thoughts and pretend they don't exist. So yeah, happy Tuesday. We survived the USDA numbers, though first day of July definitely is not acting as though we had numbers come out yesterday that were pretty benign. From an overall standpoint, which most anyone, that's involved in grains already knows, like the numbers came out, pretty close. Corn acres, slightly smaller, than what the USDA had projected back in March. One of the things that was more interesting to me, yesterday than anything, like the most interesting thing out of the acres number, and this will tell you something because it's really not that big a deal. But they did bump up or bump down anyway, the percentage of acres that will be harvested, that they project will be harvested in corn from normal. Typically it's like 91.7-ish. And in yesterday's numbers, if you did the math, it's 91.1, which isn't a huge deal, but it actually takes our harvested acres down about 700,000 from where we were, in March, and it has some implications. The market right now in the corn side of things with the new acreage number, seems to want to now be bumping up yield or arguing that yield is much, much higher, which if you look at the acreage breakdown yesterday, where we saw the biggest gains, year over year, where we saw some of the biggest gains, I shouldn't say the biggest gains, but, we saw acreage growth in states that aren't necessarily big yielders. And so remember, the USDA is projecting what would be a record yield by 1.5 bushels, if not 2, currently speaking. And we're really not, you aren't seeing the growth of acreage happen in areas that necessarily are, like I said, big yielders. First off. Secondly, one of the things that I keep hearing about is to a certain extent, it feels like the market's not necessarily believing, the numbers simply because they're like, well, I look everywhere and there's corn everywhere. Well, no shit. There's 11 million acres more of corn planted than soybeans at this point in time. Like it's a 5% increase. We're up 5 million acres. You should see a lot more corn. That's not necessarily indicative of, well, we actually have 97 million. So lastly, just that sort of last little bullet point on the corn acres. There is a number that the USDA puts out on the acreage update that kind of gives you an idea of what is left unplanted. A lot of people yesterday got not worked up over it, but I think we forget that exists, or that they've been putting that in there for the last 5 years, 6 years now. This is the 6th year we've had it. But the corn number that was unplanted is actually the second largest that we've had in the last 6 years at 3.63. Last year it was 3.36 million that were unplanted, and we ended up losing around 900,000 from the June number to the final number. I would argue last June we had a better weather, a more optimistic farmer, and more access to cash. And so I would, just throwing this out there, be really, really careful, and kind of being cemented in this acreage idea, or thinking that, hey, yeah, we have plenty of acres. We could still see a potential reduction. I've been around 94 million acres of corn planted for a minute now. I know a lot of folks in the industry are like, no, it's way higher than that. I get it. But we will get FSA data to really kind of reinforce this here in another month or so. Looking at soybeans, acreage wise, no big surprise there either. No real big change in the harvested numbers. The biggest thing in soybeans, and I didn't mention corn, quarterly stocks wise, no big surprise. Like I've been talking about on the corn side of quarterly stocks, really what it indicated, is that the farmer had sold the hell out of corn. We basically seen 85% of last year's production liquidated before the end of March, which is nearly unheard of. And that's what really kind of bastardized or made the cash market squishy. It wasn't because we had a bunch more corn. There wasn't a 200 million bushel surprise or anything like that, like folks were expecting. It just basically, the farmer had sold a lot and it helped supply the cash market, and there we are. Moving over to soybeans, quarterly stocks numbers indicated they came in a little higher than what traders were anticipating. Some folks are taking that bushel to bushel. Like I saw an analyst last night be like, well, now you have to bump up old crop ending stocks by 20 million bushels. I don't know if I buy that. I don't know if that's a necessary sort of exercise. I mean, obviously you could say another 10 to 15 maybe, and maybe they do go the full 20, but I'm going to guess the USDA, probably puts an optimistic projection for crush on it. Acreage wise, no big deal. And so the market really right now is just trading the idea that we see a reduced demand outlook, which at this point, the cash market's not necessarily pointing in that direction. And that, we're going to yield big yields, which in soybeans, we're looking at the largest double crop acres since 2014. I'm not an agronomist, but I know double crop acres don't yield the way that your primary crop acres do in soybeans. And so it just looks really hard to me, or it looks like it'll be pretty difficult to meet that USDA yield number. And in the end, like we can argue all we want about slow new crop export pace and some of these other things. I just don't necessarily see us losing significant demand. So overall, that's kind of where we landed. Any questions on that? I know it's a lot, but I'm trying to
Well, I was just
nutshell
thinking to myself, I do hope there's no quiz at the end.
Right? You need to pay attention. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm kidding. So overall, like yesterday's report, too long didn't read version. So many people were anticipating it to be kind of a grenade to the face for corn. It wasn't. It basically was just one of those things where, okay, acres wise, we still have this open window of we could lose. And I argue that we probably will, once we get into FSA. Quarterly stocks, it wasn't a negative surprise, but it just shows you this morning's trade action, like no one cares. Like we've left fundamentals behind and we're just going on, emotion at this point, it seems like. But, soybean wise on the unplanted acre side, not a lot higher than what you would typically see. Like in corn, like I said, it was the second highest on the unplanted in the last 6 years. For soybeans, it is actually one of the lower numbers. And so that's not unusual, though, like I said, we did have double crop bean acres and there could be some problems getting those planted. So we'll keep an eye on that. Outside of that, we're watching the big, beautiful bill vote, and seeing if the Ernst Murkowski Grassley amendment makes it in. I'm not 100% sure we'll see it. They haven't really brought it up yet. Ernst introduced a different amendment, that apparently passed last night. We're just moving our chairs around here. It seems like when it comes to negotiation, we figured this would be the case. Lots of favors being done, promises being made, yada, yada, yada. But that one, the Murkowski sort of amendment would be interesting. Apparently it would help to make ethanol more attractive, for SAF, which is one of those things where everyone in the industry is like, just stop trying to make fetch happen. Like stop trying to make ethanol go into SAF. It doesn't work. But whatever, we have folks that we pay to spread the ethanol gospel, I guess. And so that's one of those things. I think we should focus on exports, but no one asked me. And so we'll see if that, if that is, gonna, and obviously E15 year round. But anyway, we'll see if that matters or, what happens there. If it passes, if it doesn't, do we see it make it across the hurdle? And if it does make it through the Senate, what do they have to do to get it into the House and have that work? So we'll just be paying attention to that because it has some impacts Weather-wise, there's some talk that, we are seeing things transition more to where the rain's going to shut off a bit as we work into July. Our friend Nico posted today that, some folks should start paying attention to ag weather. It might be more of a soybean situation than a corn one. But I'd argue if you get dry during grain fill, even if you don't have a ton of heat, you're just taking that top end off. We just got done talking about how the USDA is projecting records for both corn and soybean yields. And so if we do turn dry here in July, even without extreme heat, especially with the U.S. farmer cash flow situation and how much money we're losing, or many of them are losing, when they look at this overall market, it's going to be interesting to see, just what, happens or how yield, looks. I'm going to be one to mention, take your crop progress or your crop conditions with a grain of salt. I want to remind everybody that there are 0 classes. There's no uniformity, no training, nothing, when it's a volunteer for the crop progress ratings. There isn't an even, like I said, no uniformity. There's no this is excellent, this is good, this is poor. It is all, kind of wide open. And Lance himself is you can watch the trend, which it was higher this week, but don't get too caught up in it being directly correlated to a yield. Europe, obviously, you guys are hot as hell over there.
Oh my God,
right?
I'm
How you doing?
outside at the moment. I'm outside at the moment, and I am part man, part puddle. Um,
Yeah, I can
I
imagine.
am. It's not in central London. It's not a nice place to be because
I
it's all concrete and glass, and it's
Oh,
horrific.
it sounds horrific. The other day it was so hot here. I walked in and Colton put his hand on my arm and he looked at me and he goes, "You're sticky." And I was like, "Oh, I guess I'll go take a shower." My bad. Apparently I was disgusting. So I get it. But we are watching, there's a bunch of heat over there that right now seems to be mitigating. It looks like your forecast will moderate as we work our way, into the end of the week, start of next week. And so a lot of folks are just ignoring the heat and focusing on it. Oh, it's going to get better. But there's really not a lot of rain accompanying it from what we're seeing. And so,
Yeah.
China's problematic. There's some weather things, but honestly, I'm dragging this on and saying, using a lot of words to say absolutely nothing at this point. Because most everyone yesterday afternoon at 12:05 p.m. that is in grain trade, to any true consequence that you could say, basically checked out.
Yes.
Nothing big changed yesterday. There's nothing that is going to make this to where I have to focus on this market. I'm going to come in the Monday after the 4th and start to really pay attention to what the weather says, to what, overall demand looks like, which there's a lot of things happening in grain flow that'll really matter as we go ahead, but ain't jack shit happening this week at this point unless we get a big headline. So that's it, I think. Lots of words to say nothing. You're welcome.
Well, look, any words out of you, I love every word I can hear. Angie,
that'll last for only so long. That's it.
Yeah. Well, it must be 6 months now, and I'm still coming back for more.
Right?
Angie, thank you as always. You know how much love I have for you and Big Carl, and Colton, obviously. And also congratulations.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
what was the
4
anniversary
years.
again?
4 years. Yeah.
4 years anniversary of
Yeah.
with Consus. So yeah, many happy returns on that front.
Super crazy.
I'm sure I speak for all of our listeners when I say that. But speaking of listeners, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Whatever you're doing today, stay safe, keep it tight, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Much love.
Have a good one, guys.